Welcome back. We are choosing to focus on disasters as one of our key issues as we're taking a look at the weekend review top stories that have made the headlines. And James Mambaleo is here. He is an advocate. James, it's good to see you. Just when you walked in, Mark and I were really discussing the whole issue that we're seeing within Nairobi and the disaster, leave alone just the Patel Dam, which has become the latest story, but also the mining that collapsed, and a lot of people had also lost their lives in regards to that. Yes. Here we are, and we're talking about our responsiveness as a country.
We are a very disastrous country when we come to response to any disaster. So this is something we have done for many years. As I was saying the other day when the late Ken Matiba died, government is very happy to quickly transform itself into a funeral committee and say very good things about this fellow when he was around and so on and so forth. But this is the baseline that, you know, we expect rains every year. The meteorological department knew we were going to have floods. And when we have lots of sun and drought, the meteorological department is normally in the know. Take the example of Nairobi and the kind of drainage that the drainage headache that you are witnessing right now. Government knew that this was going to happen. Let me tell you something. You don't expect any ordinary Nairobian to control these floods. You don't expect them to collect this water so that this water is stored somewhere so that, you know, we don't have floods or something. This is purely the business of government. Right from approving, you know, subdivisions for land in which buildings are going to be erected. Because normally the whole idea is, together with the Ministry of Physical Planning, together with the Department of Physical Planning in the Ministry of Lands, together with the Department of Surveys and the relevant authorities, especially in the City Council, or what is now the county government, there are officers that are charged with the responsibility of looking at every plan that is made and then approving it alongside every facility that comes with it. So let nobody say that, you know, people have built, that people have built on pieces of land for which the attendant facilities like drainage and so on do not exist. Those things should exist first before these buildings are done.
The same government that refuses to allocate about 4.4 billion to counties for disaster management.
Let's understand something. Let's look at disaster and how it should be looked at. I'm looking at the images of the dam that just broke, and I'm wondering, when was the last time those villagers were made aware of what to do in case that dam breaks? Okay? When was the last time there was a drill to show them how to run to higher ground? When was the last time there was a drill to show them where in their houses is safest in the event of a flood? This is what happens in countries like Japan. This is what happens in Denmark. This is what happens in Australia, and people need to be prepared. That's one. So there is a responsibility of just being able to inform the public. If you ask the average Nairobian, when was the last time they participated in a disaster drill, they have no idea. And yet, this country, by the way, happens to sit on the Rift Valley. The chances of us having an earthquake are one. It's only a matter of time. It will happen. So disaster preparedness is not just a matter of budget. It's a matter of also common sense. Let county governments, let the national government prepare its people. We are building 57 dams across this country. Kudos to the Big Four agenda. That is a very important thing. But these citizens who will be sitting downstream to this dam will be affected. Are they prepared beyond the compensation they will receive for their land being reallocated to government? That's one. Secondly, disaster preparedness is not just about spending money about it. As my colleague here said, we need to plan. What you need to understand is when you buy a car, if you found that car missing a seatbelt, you would return it to the factory.
Oh, definitely.
If you found that car missing an airbag, you'd return it to the factory. But these two things are only useful in the event of an emergency. Okay? In the lifetime of a car, they're only supposed to be used once. But when we build in Kenya, we do not build with the safety belts of society in place. We do not build with the airbags of society in place. And therefore, any small bump kills our people.
And the other thing that is of question, James, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that did even these dams, let alone Patel dams, do they meet the standard? Who is approving it? Who is supposed to be managing it? Who inspects it? There are all these other questions that we need to be asking, but it's only after a disaster happens that we realize, oh, by the way, do dams even meet safety standards?
Dams is a very a dear subject to me because I've been involved in quite a number of them, especially the disputes around these dams, ranging from construction disputes to disputes of settlement of peoples around those dams and so on and so forth. There are so many problems with the way we do our things in this country that we actually need to change, like, immediately. Let me tell you something. You know, government has become this mongrel who is very happy to look like they are responding to problems when they happen, because that is politically, that's politically astute. Government is happy to say now we have allocated 4 billion shillings or whatever number of billions of shillings to deal with this particular situation when they could have used a lot less money, you know, to prevent the occurrence of some of these disasters. But you know what? If they did it that time, nobody was going to say government has done anything. So I want to agree with my brother that, you know, these dams have a lot of problems. Not just, by the way, there are a number of dams that were supposed to be built in the last 10 years, which are still dragging out there because government did not allocate funds in time, because cartels in government and outside doing business have decided that they're going to rake in those billions without necessarily building anything. And we see all these disputes arising from time to time. Nobody takes stock and goes down to ask really what is the problem. Because there are a number of dams. Leave the new dams which are going to be part of the Big Four agenda. There are numerous dams which should have been built several years ago, which could contain some of these floods that you're seeing, which haven't been built. One of the biggest problems where they're not built is because government officials in the relevant ministries collude with private contractors to take away this money from the taxpayer, but they actually produce no dams. So you will find most of them are white elephants. Some of them, the work that has been done has gone down the drain because, you know, if you don't complete the dam, there's a possibility that all the work you've done is going to get lost with it. So I think it's important that in a new reawakening of this country, not just in disasters, or in response to disasters, but government should now take responsibility and put this country on the right footing forward. Government officials should understand, both at the national government and county level. And by the way, you will look at our governors and you will wonder which book they read, because you look at the appointments they make, you look at the projects they prioritize, because I don't know whether they even read Schedule 4 of the Constitution to know really what their responsibilities as governors are, because, you know, most of these activities which would lead to a proper prevention of floods and those kind of disasters have also now been devolved to the counties. And county governments have absolutely no clue. The other day there was a devolution conference, and we sat here and said, you know, those guys will get in there, they will see nothing, they will hear nothing, they will walk out with nothing, they will do nothing, and then they will wait for the next devolution conference.
You know, James says that, and Mark, before you also jump in, this is keeping in mind that there's a disaster bill that is sitting in the National Assembly for now a year. And sad enough, I will not be shocked if come next year the same disaster bill is still sitting in the same assembly. It's what Mark is James has just highlighted, the fact that we're just the corruption between private construction companies and the government, wide projects. It's just nothing.
You know what I find interesting about this country is what we call a disaster. What disaster has happened? No, you know, in the grand scheme of disasters, we've had a little rain compared to what the Bangladeshis face, okay? We've had a little rain.
The thighs.
Yes. Yeah. And then now, it is a disaster. Do you remember the tsunami? That is a disaster.
Oh, yes.
An earthquake of 9.0, that is a disaster. A little rain is not a disaster. It is foolishness. Tunakufa kwa sababu ya ujinga wetu. Let's be very clear. There is no disaster that has happened. That dam that broke out, let me ask you a question. That 90 million liters of water we are talking about, did it suddenly fill?
No.
Did the crack suddenly appear? You understand? These are things that take time to happen.
Right.
And therefore, that person in charge of that dam saw it happen. But because the water is going downstream, and because we've not prepared the people downstream for that, they were caught sleeping. That is not a disaster. It is foolishness. If you die in a car accident today and you didn't have your safety belt and you had demobilized your airbag, we would not have pity on you because God has provided space for you to save yourself. There's a poem we used to read in primary school. It was called They Ran Out of Mud. This is the place where Kenya is, where we've run out of mud and we are building a mud house on a piece of land. That is the problem. So it's not just about the bill. It's not about county government. It's about this. When health was devolved, what governors did is they bought ambulances. Because the ambulance will be written there, county government of Machakos, county government of wherever, and it is a moving billboard. They did not buy medicines because no one can see medicines. They did not hire staff because no one can see staff. It's the same thing with the disaster preparedness. When you install an alarm system in your dam, no one will see it until a disaster comes. And that's the problem. We want to do things that are politically visible, but we do not want to do the things that are politically invisible, but critical to the safety of our people. So
here we are talking about Uhuru's big four agendas: food, security, housing, yet we can't even get basic things right.
But you see, here's the thing. I applaud the president on one thing, okay? If you've listened to him the last 4 months, our president has literally revolutionized how he's speaking. And he's talking about business unusual. So part of the business unusual that he needs to do is he needs to hold his governors within the Jubilee Party at least to task in terms of being able to spend money on disasters and on healthcare, because governors are not doing that. And I'm not ashamed to say this on public TV. A lot of governors are ignoring these issues because they feel like they're not as politically welcome as doing a car wash for teenagers. And by the way, us young people can do other things than wash cars. This imagination needs to change. So we need to understand, we just don't want political gimmicks. County governments must be held to account to make sure, whether it is 200 million. In this country, 200 million can save people from disaster. Because the governor in Solai, what should he have done? He should have told these people, we've seen this dam is in danger. Can you move to higher ground? We will provide tents for you. Live there for a month. 48 people will not have died.
All right. James, just speaking about governors and also government officials, Matiang'i says that the dam was fast. Do you agree?
I don't know the speedometer that he's using to determine the fastness or the effectiveness of that response. But should we be talking about the response to that disaster, or should we be talking about how we should have prevented ourselves from getting there in the first place? I've told you, and I'm one of those people who support some of the good things that this government is doing. But, you know, there's something that our president needs to do, and do it very fast, because this is his legacy term. He first needs to take stock of the kind of fellows he has put in charge of some of the critical aspects of his government, and then tell them that, friends, you know, this is not a place you've come to holiday. I have put you here because probably in the past, things haven't worked the way they should have worked. And I expect you to start, first and foremost, from reviewing the policy on each and every of these aspects, and then coming up with a better way of dealing with some of these things in your lifetime. Not that you want to push this to the next administration. Let me tell you, every time there is a problem, people think that it's Parliament that should act and create more law and more laws. There is actually too much law existing in this country, overlapping on each other, and this law never assists us anyway, because the problem is in implementation. If we implemented half of the laws, half of the administrative policy frameworks that are in place in respect of each and every aspect of these problems that you see, we couldn't get there in the first place. As my colleague says, for crying out loud, this is water. Believe me, this country still depends, the farmers of this country still depend on rain-fed agriculture. However, you will be told that, you know, rain-fed agriculture is not going to help you because you are never going to be sure when it's going to rain. And in most cases, if we were a serious country, then we should be investing money in subsidizing farmers because we know for sure they're going to be in loss. So this is what we must do as a country very quickly. We must tell the people in charge, especially the governors. I think it's not just Jubilee governors. All governors, including ODM and other party governors, should now know that the reason they were given those positions as county governors is so as to be able to do some of those things that a government sitting in Nairobi wouldn't do so fast for the people on the ground, including organizing their counties in such a manner as to make sure that there is progressive development, but that at the same time there is a preservation of the environment they have been given in such a way as to allow future generations to enjoy this particular environment. And this is very important. Let me tell you, most of the county governments have not done proper spatial plans. Most of them do not even know where the populations are. Most of them do not know where their strengths as counties lie. Most of them do not know which particular disasters probably are prone to the specific areas that they manage. They are just happy to fly a flag and say, we are county governors. Believe me, you will see them in weddings. They're going to appear in colorful places where people are enjoying themselves. But when I don't want to see governors running to funerals to say they have donated coffins and to say that they have taken over the expenses for the funerals and so on and so forth. Let county governments, let county governors decide today, as government officials at the national level decide that, you know, the basic reason why you are in government is not so as to wait for that tender so that you can make some money, but to do something to assist in the particular docket that you have been given so that we do not have to cry about these things anymore.
Now, let us move from that specific conversation to what is leadership in this country. Very quickly, the referendum that has been a big topic of discussion the entire week. Mark, do you think that this referendum that politicians are calling for is inescapable?
Well, in my view, the political will in the mind of a lot of Kenyans exists for not a referendum per se, but for certain changes to be seen within the executive and the structure of the opposition. That will exist in Jubilee, it exists in ODM, it exists everywhere. Where I disagree is the need of having a referendum around this issue. And I'll tell you why. Number one, referendums are expensive. Number two, it is unnecessary, okay? It is unnecessary because what we are trying to do is we are trying to create an executive that to us looks like or seems like is all-inclusive. And that's why we're having debates of a prime minister with executive power and things like that. I personally do not think we need a prime minister with executive power. I think we need a prime minister who sits in parliament to represent government every day and to answer executive questions and to act as an interface between parliament and senate and the executive. That can be done by creating a position of chief cabinet secretary, and it does not need a referendum. That's one. The second part is we need to dignify the opposition. How do we dignify the opposition? In this country, Zinzi, if you run for president in 2028, let's say, and you get 7 million votes, okay, and the winner gets 7.1 million votes, you will no longer have a say in this country because you will be put in the dustbin of political exclusion. What I think needs to happen is we need to allow every person who runs for president the right to be nominated to Senate or to Parliament.
James, your thoughts on this? And even as an advocate, I would love to hear whether you think this 14-member Bridge Initiative Committee would actually work.
I have seen a member of 14. I think they're now 16 because there were two co-chairs or two co-conveners. And I do not know what exactly their mandate is, but I suspect that they have been given an opportunity by the principals, in this case, President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, to sit down and look at the general 8 points that were in the piece of document that informed the handshake. And I'm sure that they're going to look at various aspects of how we need to make this country's politics better, probably inclusion and improve our systems in a general sense. However, let me tell you something about the referendum. The referendum talk is something that is potentially problematic for us in this country. Why? Because if we approach the governance of this country, let me tell you, we have borrowed a presidentialist system. We borrowed a presidentialist system from the United States and then tried to continentalize it by looking at the South African model and try to give it an African touch. Now, one of the things that you must understand extremely carefully is this, that, you know, in a democracy like the presidentialist one that we have, every time you run for an election and you lose, then you're supposed to go home. There are no two ways about it. So if you have a scenario in which people who have run in elections and have lost before now want to push for constitutional amendments so that they can be fitted within government, then we are definitely going to have a problem. Because the problem we need to fix is how to deal with presidential contenders who lose in the election. That is going to be a moving target all the time. What we need to do is develop mechanisms within this country in which whichever method of government we have, you know, there's always going to be a way in which we are going to arrive at a leader of this country all the time. Even if it is a parliamentary system, it is probably going to be the leader of the party with the majority of seats in parliament. Now, what we need to do, and these Kenyans have to be aware, is that we must make sure that we conduct elections in this country, which after we have conducted, everybody has no reason to doubt. So that when Mark has been elected, if Mark was the leader of the party that has a majority of seats in parliament, then he automatically becomes prime minister. Not that Mamboleo is left wondering whether in actual fact the seats that he has acquired would have been less or more. If we dealt with that question, then we are going to be home and dry. But if we go to this referendum thinking, let's change the executive in such a way so as to give Mark Bichachi the office of Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm really wishing you well, my brother. If we do that, next time, in the next election, we will be looking for how to create the position of second deputy president or third deputy president to accommodate James Mamboleo, who has learned that from the last election, all you need to do is fight in the trenches for as long as you can, and you're going to get a seat. All
right, so that right there by James Mamboleo is what is going to close Week in Review. James Mamboleo, an advocate, quite passionate over there. And of course, Mark Bichachi, who is a writer and a political analyst. You can catch him on Sunday again, on Sunday edition. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And thank you for your time. We want to take a quick commercial break, but we'll be right back. Within this last hour, we still have a lot more for you, so keep it Morning Express. We'll be right back.